what kind of audience you want to go after, and then make a plan for actually going after them. Eleanor, are you?
I'm gonna grow my audience.
There's a 90-day plan in here.
90-day plan.
I love it.
So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about metrics and just kind of get from a show of hands, who thinks page views is the single most important metric to be watching? No. Visits. Visitors? Unique visitors? You got like 4 or 5. Bounce rates? Time on site? I mean, like most of you did not raise your hands. Sorry, you didn't raise your hand.
Maybe
Time
the
on
question
site.
should have been,
Time on site?
do you look at your analytics?
Yes.
I think the answer is whatever your prospective client or advertiser is most interested in hearing about.
Interesting. So for you, it's about what you need to tell your client to
They
make
might
a
not
sale.
care about bounce rates, but they really might care about who, the more active part of that.
Couldn't you tell him anything?
Just about, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it's everything.
What was that?
Everything.
You think it's everything, that the whole picture. That's a lot of data in Google Analytics, and actually, I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit here. It'll make you feel like this, all lost, wondering what the heck is going on, like someone maybe killed your father in front of you. And hopefully I want to help you make a plan that makes you an assassin who can, eventually kill the
People that killed your mother.
yeah, right? That would be awesome. That's what we're hoping for. We'll see. I mean, hopefully it happens before the author dies. So a little bit about me before we get into that. My name is Ned Burke. I used to be a Lion publisher, and I was also one of the founding board members of Lion. Today I work for Town Knight Center at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. I work with a community of practice, which is a group of top-tier publishers from around the globe and their audience development teams to kind of trade knowledge. And it gives me some really awesome insight into how these people are doing. And then I'm always thinking about it back in the lens of me being a bootstrap publisher and what the hell did I wish I knew that could have made me do my job better. So, to go back, I had hoped to do this. I was really only expecting like 6 people here, so this is awesome. To go back to you drowning, one of the things that's going to help you a lot is focusing on what really matters, and you're going to need to answer some questions to do that. So let's just start with what is audience development, because that's the term that I'm using here. These are all the things you might see in an audience development job description. They're just tools. They don't really say much about what an audience development team does. And some of that is because the job itself is kind of new and still forming. By the way, I'm going to be going really fast because we got a bit of a late start and I have way too many slides. So if anyone wants to stop me and just jump in, feel free to do so. So this is the description I wrote. Audience development is the strategic pursuit of audience segments and user behaviors to support audience goals. So you're building segments, you're finding the audiences that you want to do things that you want them to do to achieve the goals that you want. That might be to impress an advertiser, or it might be to further your journalistic mission. So, before we go any further, let's talk about audience segments. Can anyone think of an example of an audience segment? Millennials. That's pretty good. So that's an age group. I'll just go on. That age group is a demographic. You have different kinds of ways of breaking down your audience. One of the things I want you to take away from this is that you do not have one audience, you have many audiences. Your audience is built up of segments. These are people with different commonalities that you are just putting into different buckets to keep them organized. So some of the classic ways of doing that are like millennials. You do it by age groups, you do it by interests. Here's some other ways you can do it. You can do it age, you can do it by needs, personal needs, personal profiles. For a Lion member, you might start thinking of more useful examples like the civically engaged audience, someone who is a PTA member or something. I really like digital behaviors because they're really easy to track in Google Analytics. So that could be things like your highly engaged reader, someone who comes back to your site 3 times a week. That's a segment that you really want to build up. Just to show you how crazy and niche some of this can get. Does anyone know what the screen is? Okay, if you've ever...
The CRM?
That is not a CRM, that is Facebook ads. So if you are trying to, if you're going to go place an ad on Facebook, they're going to ask you to target to the audience that you want to reach. That could be as broad as all men and women in the United States of America, or it could be really, really specific. And just to give you an idea of how specific, this is someone who's trying to reach, I don't have my notes in front of me anymore, so it's women who like women within 50 miles of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who are married or expecting parents, and like gardening and booze and crafts. So that's a really narrow market, and the point here is that if you're trying to sell something and you know it's going to resonate to that market, you want to hit that market and you want to send them exactly the right message. And that's what Facebook is really good at. And hopefully you're going to get better with dividing up your tactics to the different audiences that you know you have. So why should you think in segments? You should do this because you want to treat different people differently. In short, your competitors are doing it. The people are getting, especially online, they're getting more and more niche. They're getting more and more narrow and better able to service really specific groups. And if you're trying to serve everyone, you're going to go the way of the dinosaur. You're not really going to be serving anyone. So it's really good to do. And also, when you know what audiences matter, you can do this. Prioritize ruthlessly. All the ideas that come up, you can start pushing them away unless they speak directly to your audience. And that's kind of the theme that's going to be going on throughout this. It's the whole reason of making a plan.
Is the geographic community segmented enough, or is that still too broad?
So, I mean, I imagine here if you're a lion, you are already segmented by geographic community. You need to figure out how you're going to break down that audience even more. Because chances are, you're good, like I said, you're going to have more than one audience. So your audience might be all of Tulsa, Oklahoma, but you might have a new beat that you're developing for women who like women, and are expecting parents and whatever the other stuff I said was. So a really easy way to do this, though, is instead of thinking in terms of that, in terms of people who are 13 to 35 and all of that, which is a really dull, unhelpful way to think, you can use user personas. And this is a really good tool for those of you who don't like data and relate more with people, which I think is kind of the human condition. No one really likes numbers. This is a shortcut to segmenting. So this is an example of a persona. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. I have handouts. I forgot I had handouts.
Handouts! On paper.
Yeah. Would anyone like to start passing these around? There might be a receipt for copies in there too.
Okay.
I need that back.
I'll pass that down that way.
So this is Daniel. Daniel has a quote here that's something he might say about legal news. This is one I actually wrote for a real product I was developing. I was trying to figure out how I can build some sort of news product for courts. And this is a target audience that I had. He's a young guy, he really likes tech, he finds things like LexisNexis News really boring, but he likes to tell his friends about what's going on, and we talk about his motivations, his barriers, his trusted sources, his tech access. We're going to get a little more into this later. The shortcut here, again, I'm even going to skip this screen. So Daniel is fictional. But he's not entirely fictional. He's the synthesized observations of many people, and a user persona is the depiction of a single person, but it really represents a group or a segment. And the best personas are made after you do lots of interviews and collect data, do surveys, especially if you're a large publisher and you're trying to understand all the different parts of your audience. But you guys are lions, and you have an advantage. You guys are closer to the ground than any other journalism organization out there. You know your communities better than anyone. You know things like where what the PTA mom is like, and what she does, what kind of car she drives. You know where they shop. You know how many birders are in your community, and what drives them nuts. And you're already thinking of these types in your head, and all you have to really do is just start to segment them and get them down on paper. So why make a persona? Again, it's about ruthless prioritization. It's going to help you focus a lot when you start thinking through these people. Most importantly, it makes you think in terms of people and not data points. You relate more to people if they have a name and a face, even if it's fictional. And when you start building out these personas, you start to also internalize the needs that you start to assume for them. You internalize the fears that they have. You internalize all of the different things that make them a complete person. And you're now in their shoes. And when you start thinking about the decisions you have to make, the metrics that matter, the beats you want to develop, the, how your site looks, you can do that from the perspective of this person who you've created, but you've created through observing all of the people around you. And you're prioritizing that audience segment, just a very act of making it and saying that this segment matters to me enough for me to put it on paper rather than have it, just be excess audience, means that you will start building more and more towards that. And you can start, again, pushing away all of the decisions and distractions that don't relate to serving this person. So just to get into it, I just passed out the template. It has both the example, it has, and then it has a template of how you might start to fill it out. In the interest of time, I'm probably not going to get into too much of this. The pull quote can be a little weird. It's just, make up something that you think that person might actually say. And what really matters down here is, okay, you have the backstory, that's the biography, you're going to talk a little bit where they come from. That starts to frame the person in your head for you, characteristics, you start talking about their personality, who they hang out with. You talk about their goals, their professional goals, personal goals. But this is the stuff that matters even more, because once you have this, you can really start thinking through what makes them tick, what makes them seek information, if indeed it is information that you're looking to provide them. Why do they seek out information? Not on your site, but in generally. What do they want to get out of that? What do they dislike about that? And then barriers, it's things like, I don't have time to check the news very often. I'm a very busy person. So you might want to start listing the things that they might say if you were to ask this imaginary person in your head, why didn't you read my site today? Those are the barriers. And then these two are also really important. These are the kinds of media that they read. So be specific again. It could be, do they read the New York Times or do they read Breitbart? Are they getting their information from their family and friends? Is that who they value their information from? If they're a New York Times reader, are they a paid subscriber? Or do they mostly just pay attention to Facebook and get their information that way? And that's a really important question to ask yourself. Is the reader that you're targeting, are they more likely to turn to Facebook than turn to you or Twitter or Nuzzle or any of 100 other things? And then you also want to talk about their tech access. Are they on mobile phones? Are they, is this person who's likely to read your website on their desktop computer at work on their lunch break? Or are they more likely to be thumbing through it in their Facebook feed while they're waiting to pick up their kid from a soccer match? That's a really important question. You don't think about that enough. Most people don't think about that enough. And it's going to really affect how you do stories. It's going to affect how you design your site and the kinds of things that you focus on. You can add all kinds of things. You can do a day in the life. What's really important is as you continue to add to your persona, and I recommend you visit them as often as you can and continue to shape them out, it should just be more and more about what makes that person tick. Make them a more complete person. Get into their mental state. Remember to mute your mother's text messages when you're doing presentations. Generally speaking, you want to have at least 3 to 4 personas. One might be the advertiser. You might want to know what makes the advertiser tick, and that'll help you figure out what you're going to tell them today. But you can also you want to do it to your main reader. You want to do it to an aspirational reader. You can get really specific with these and say, I want to typecast that reader who really comes into my site from Facebook, but 3 to 5 times a week and sees 2 pages per visit. What's making them tick? And the more specific you get, the more difficult it's going to be accurate. You're going to have to end up making more assumptions about that person if you haven't done the research. But most of you, to do a broader segmentation of your audiences, you already have that information stored in your head. So, before I get into the bigger plan here, are there any questions about user personas and audience segmentation? It's really exciting stuff. Do you guys have an archetype in your head about who your audience is? I mean, I used to always think about when I was running my site, you know, this guy is going to react this way, and it was a real person. I was always thinking about a real person because I didn't know about user personas. But you found yourself still doing this, and you're like, this guy's going to hate this article. Yeah, did you find yourself doing that? Yeah. So I mean, you're already segmenting. Just build it out more. Build a complete picture of that person, including, especially, the devices he uses, the sources he uses. So an audience development plan. Another handout. So this is a worksheet to kind of get you through a plan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To get you through a plan. I don't want to spend too much time on each of these. I put as much description as I can into each of the objects so that you can read it and understand it and do it on your own. But it's basically figuring out what you want to do, who's the user persona that you're trying to target with that initiative. And what you want to do might be a new beat, it might be a website redesign, it might be saying I want to increase Facebook likes, it might be a networking event, it could be any of 100 things, a million things. And then you got to justify it. You have to say, what about this audience profile makes sense for that objective? Why did I make that connection? Drawing from the persona that you've created. And then you also want to say, and why does this matter to my editorial goals? And why does it matter to my business goals? You don't have to answer both of those questions. You can do some things just because they matter to your business goals. You can definitely do some things just because they matter to your editorial goals. But you should be connecting any initiative that you do to one of those things. And then your approach, if it's a new beat, you guys are familiar with editorial plans. It could be as simple as that. It could be, you know, what tone are you using to address this audience? What platforms are you using to address it? What's the cadence? How often are you speaking to them? What kind of coverages? What kind of partnerships are you going to use to reach them? But it could be something else too. It could be, let's say your objective was, I want to reduce bounce rates of mobile readers. And you have an idea of who your mobile reader is, and your justification is because it informs them better. They're cycling through the site, and that also builds loyalty, which helps your business. So your approach could be, okay, you know, you've looked at your website on your phone. I hope you've all done this, and then you realized, you know, this thing for this person is really hard to use. You know, where is the next story button? You know, something like that could be an approach you're taking. And then the success metrics. If your objective was bounce rates, you're going to be paying attention to your bounce rates. So you're going to be paying attention to your pages per visit. And you just want to make sure to outline them from the get-go. Say, this is what matters. And that's where the focus comes in to what matters in Google Analytics. And then your schedule, your 90-day plan. It doesn't have to be 90 days. I like 90 days. Eleanor drilled into my head that 90 days is a wonderful schedule for planning. And actually, it pans out too for local news sites. Your audiences aren't really large enough to see audience results in a week, 2 weeks, a month. But 3 months, you can really start to see whether an experiment that you're running is playing out. So not only do you want to see when you're beginning the experiment, when you're ending the experiment, you need to budget time. Usually if it's a data point like analytics, to be checking it weekly. So you want to say how often you're going to do it. I say at least weekly. And putting that into a spreadsheet. And the reason for that is because you haven't succeeded just because, you know, on day one, let's keep using bounce rates as an example. Your bounce rate was lower on the last day as opposed to on the first day. That doesn't mean you've succeeded if along the way it's been going up and down and fluctuating. So you need to be paying attention to that over time because the real power of insight, the story that that data is telling you is always told over time. Again, so why do this? Focus. It helps you evaluate the effort in the context of your goals. It's, again, telling you what metrics matter to you because you have certain stated goals now, as opposed to, I want to run a local news site. What matters? Page views, I guess, you know, because it's the first thing that Google Analytics tells you. It'll help you allocate resources to high impact activities. So you're going to be seeing along the way what's working and what's not working. If things aren't working, you can just cut them out. If you're actually saying like, oh, I'm distributing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram because this is what makes sense and everyone else is using it, but you're spending 3 hours a day crafting your tweets, but you're getting a seventh of the referral traffic for Facebook, well, you should probably shift over that time to Facebook, or just cut out, just fully automate Twitter and spend your time making more stories or selling ads. And also, when you're following your data over time, that story that it's going to tell you is all about new opportunities. It's going to be all the things that new patterns are going to be revealed to you. The struggles for your site, the struggles for your reader, the challenges, the obstacles that are coming into place within the opportunities as well. Things that they're interested in. Maybe you've been covering a little story area on the side and didn't even realize it was doing marginally better. It takes you 20 minutes to write these stories, but per minute spent, it's doing slightly more efficient in traffic, or it's being more lucrative for your whatever the heck it is. Well, you can now start building that out as a potential beat or whatever it is. So what if it fails? What happens if the number at the end, okay, with bounce rates, what if that's higher at the end than, does everyone know what a bounce rate is? Okay. For anyone who might have been too embarrassed. A bounce rate is the percentage of people who leave your site without clicking on the second page. So you want a very low bounce rate. So if that number is higher at the end of the 3-month experiment, it doesn't mean you failed. Audience developments are very much experiments. Audience development plans are experiments, and you're testing against a hypothesis. And you're always going to be learning every time you do this. You're going to be proving your hypothesis wrong. You're going to be learning about the audience segment assumption that you have. Maybe that was flawed. Maybe the objective just didn't pan out. Maybe the success metrics weren't the right metrics to be watching. But every time you do that, sorry, I had notes on this slide and I can't see them. But every time you do that, you're learning more and more about your audience. And that's really kind of the name of the game here. The moment you stop learning about your audience and monitoring your audience is the moment you lose them. You run these experiments time and time again. Most actually will fail. When I am working with these top tier news organizations, they just tell me about failure after failure after failure. Facebook just did a massive experiments, but then they were talking about the thousands of experiments that they do every day, of which 99% get thrown out. They don't make any change to their algorithm, but they've been testing assumptions about what their users like and dislike. You need to be doing the same thing. Again, because the moment you stop, you're going to be left in the dust by a new social network, a new news site, a new distraction of some sort. So you're going to be getting a better grasp of the contours and depth of the people that you serve and the needs that they have, and yada, yada, yada. I can keep saying words. So I'm going to ask again, what's the single most important metric in your Google Analytics?
Returning visitors?
I'm so mean. It's not the right question.
Right.
The question is, who is your audience? What do you want them to do, and why? And once you figure that out, you know what it is. And I could dive into some real-world examples I've recently dealt with. Oh, I did this ahead of time. That's awesome. None of my practices did. So before I go ahead, are there any questions? Yes.
So audience personas, I think are, you believer in them, I think they're great, and I think you absolutely should use them. I think sometimes folks struggle with trying to put them together and trying to identify the best insights to use. So in my experience, I found often that personas kind of tend to look like the person who owns the business first, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of advice might you offer so that, the
Yeah.
persona doesn't look like the guy who's running the
Yeah, that's
the
really
operation?
that's a really really good point. And
Or girl.
there's a few things I'd say to it. One is I skipped a slide, and that talks a little bit about where personas came from. Personas emerged, as far as I know anyway, from my Wikipedia reading, in the tech and engineering industry. And basically what it was is engineers and developers, believe it or not, are not the best people for gauging what other people's personalities are like. And they didn't know what their needs were. They didn't know how to use technology. So they were over-engineering all these solutions, figuring like, oh yeah, the average person in 1989 is going to know how to use like an OS in depth and be able to work with databases and blah 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 blah. Well, it turned out they didn't. And to help them along, someone had the great idea of creating personas, and these personas were the average user. And like I said, they were based on focus groups and surveys. You should probably, if you struggle with this, I would say actually base it on a real person. They tell you not to do this. I would say do it anyway, and then elaborate on that person. Just build them out into a fuller picture than what you actually know about them. And if you know your community well, and I assume you do, I mean, these are, you guys are as close to the ground as it gets, you're going to be able to picture the head of the Civic Association who is who works in a nursing home 2 blocks from her house, and the SUV that she drives, the color SUV that she drives. Just close your eyes, you're picturing this person. I know this person, her name is Kathy Flynn. She runs the Sheepshead Bay Plum Beach Civic Association, or she used to. She retired from the nursing home, but none of this matters. When I close my eyes and think about how she uses a computer, I know she's not using one at work. I know she's not using one at home either. I know most of the articles that she gets, she's being forwarded it by email, I'm guessing, and also pays a little attention on Facebook. You can look up the reader that you have in your mind on Facebook, on Twitter, and on other social media, and see what they're doing with it, and start modeling them out from there. It's really important to not be in your own head and think that anyone is like you. If you think as a journalist that anyone is like you, then you are way wrong. You have more in common with that engineer who does not connect with people and understand his users than you do with the average person. And that's because you are, I hope, a much more critical thinker. And yeah, that's maybe that's a little flattering. And when you approach news and you approach information, you do it from a totally different context and through a totally different lens than a soccer mom or Kathy Flynn. Did that help? Just stop thinking about yourselves. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So are you saying it's important to not try to be all things to all people, to try to instead, be a little bit more targeted in what your site is looking to achieve?
Yes. I do say that's important. And I say that's important because not all, that might have been the same slide, I don't know. Not all audiences are created equal. Does it matter that you get 1,000 impressions on an article, or one impression from that one subscriber who's going to give you $100, as an annual fee to continue reading from your site, versus the 1,000 that aren't going to pay? They just saw it on Facebook and they bounced out of your site after 20 seconds. I mean, one of those matters a lot more to your site, right? And it also matters not just in a financial way. So imagine you're doing social justice coverage or whatever, criminal justice coverage. You have a mission, a journalistic mission, to have an impact. It's not just about making money or being able to do the next story. You want to make change in the world. You don't go and create a site like that just because it's funsies, it's depressing stuff. So the audience you want to target that creates is the one that creates the impact. Again, it's not the 1,000 people who come by and look at it and do nothing. It's the one person who contacts the congressman, or the one person who goes to their civic association, or is in the state assembly or something like that, or I could keep going. So you definitely want to be creating an audience and shaping an audience that suits your goals. Now you could, again, I can't say this enough, you have multiple audiences. So you're not just serving one group of people. You want to be serving to the goals of multiple groups of people. So you can have a beat that covers one thing, and you can have a beat that covers another thing, and your editorial strategies and your distribution strategies can be totally different.
I'm finding it's really hard kind of pulling teeth getting people to click onto the civic news, like the local government school news, because when I post things about the new restaurants coming in, it just goes berserkers, you know. It's trying to find that. I know who the restaurant
Yeah.
audience is. I'm trying to find that civic audience because I really want it to be ultimately about the journalism. You
Yeah.
kind of have to go with the needs of things first and then come around to more serious. The meat, the dessert before the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, so I mean, some of this, I had the impression years ago when I was a young man
Last year.
that I needed to do, like you said, it was the news diet, right? I needed to do the 4 stabbings and the 2 business stories in order to get people to read the 1 civic meeting. And you know what? The people who were reading the 4 stabbings and the two restaurant stories were not reading the civic story anyway. My understanding of it now is that actually I needed to be thinking about the audience just for that 1 story and where to reach them differently. You know, okay, so you're not gonna reach them in your regular Facebook page, right? Because Facebook is weighting your distribution to the engagements it's getting, and they do it in relation to the other stories in your newsfeed. So that restaurant story is always going to actually cause the school story to kind of fall off the map a little bit. But if you're thinking, okay, the school person, the PTA person who's going to be really interested in that story, the person I'm fleshing out in my head now, you know, they are on Facebook, but they're probably also in a Facebook group. And they're probably also talking about school issues there. And that's where you want to meet that person. And you want to do maybe a networking event or something. And you also want to realize that it's not the page view. With that person, it's not the page view. It's will they end up going to a civic meeting or something like that? Will they mention your site? Are you now setting the agenda on school issues or civic issues or whatever?
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes you have to sort of decipher as well. If people are really interested in your restaurants, if that's what they're really interested in, you don't want to tell people essentially that they're using your site wrong, right? You kind of have to look at the insights that you're gathering from people and then serve up to that. But the folks who are really interested in restaurant news and all of those things may be the monetization channel that you use to enable you to pay for the journalism that enables you to continue to write those civic stories. And that audience is always going to be smaller. It's a smaller segment, but to Ned's point, folks who may take action or that you may be able to impact. So if you can kind of say, well, if this is what people are really interested in, then allow me to monetize that and use that to help fund the things I really care about.
Yeah. So thank you for making that point. And it goes back to the idea that you have multiple audiences. And you do need to serve that person because there's also a value in knowing, you know, when businesses open and close and the audience that does it. If I were to go back to the slide where I gave possible lion-oriented audience segments, one of them was the person who goes to restaurants 3 times a week or more. You know, you can start crafting that kind of audience with more restaurant stories, and then you can go to the restaurants and say, I own this. And then you can pay for more school board coverage.
When you're looking at developing your personas, sometimes I've done reader surveys, and it is kind of a self-selection group, and sometimes I'm not quite sure, like, are these, you know, and again, I don't know, you know, I just posted on my site, I can fill out your survey. Trying to come up with a kind of a more accurate, helpful persona. Are there any, like, analytics that you might suggest that we look at, like in terms of age, or I mean, how would you approach it besides just sort of talking to?
So this is this is a shortcut. I don't think any lion or most lions have the resources to do the kind of in-depth research to understand all of the multifaceted elements of their audience. It's made so that you don't have to do 100,000 surveys. It's really based on your expertise and the way that you are psychologically already putting these people into buckets. And there are problems with it. There's bias problems with it. I mean, you're going to start thinking about people in certain ways that, first of all, might just be wrong, or you might be unfamiliar with. And some of that, I suggest that over time, you will get a better handle of it, especially as you're running these experiments. One of the things that I noted when I said all the things that could be wrong is that you have audience segments that you've made incorrect assumptions about. And you can go back to your persona and refine it. These are living documents. The audience plan itself is a living document. You should always be refining it. It never dies. An experiment never stops unless you totally decide that it's just garbage. But usually it's just a matter of fixing it. You've chosen a goal that you believe in. That answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, do you have another, especially if you're starting out, like, where do I?
Oh, yeah. Talk to people. Talk to people. So yeah, that one I pulled up, the example that you have in your hand, Daniel. I know nothing about courts. I know nothing about lawyers except I had to pay one once and it cost me a lot of money, twice. Not like Bill O'Reilly money. It's like I sold a business. I needed to pay a lawyer.
Good qualifier.
Thank you. Oh gosh. But what I did is I met with probably about 24 lawyers or people who worked in courts or around courts, judges. The guy who, what did he do? He had a non-legal, like a clerk job or something in the court, like just an administrative job in the courthouse. And I was just asking them, how do you use information? What do what's your day like? What's your home life like? When are you using your phone? When are you using your... I asked them the questions that make this stuff up. And I was just looking for the overlapping information. Again, it's a very small sample size, but it's a place to start. There's about 5 minutes left. Are there any more questions? I like this. This happened this morning. I saw it this morning. Yeah.
Not so much a question, more, I guess, a critique. I was hoping, I'm at a different stage. I haven't launched a publication yet. I'm looking at doing a business journal.
Mm-hmm.
So my audience is pretty niche. And I want to appeal from C-suite all the way to Main Street, business types. And it's maybe something other people can glean, but I'm looking for a critique. This is what I'm doing. I'm trying to measure interest. I think that there's interest, or there's a potential market for a publication. I'm testing 2 different geographical regions. I've set up MVP pages, landing pages for both. I've bought ads on LinkedIn, Google, Facebook, different variety of ads, pushing those out. With trying to get people back to my landing pages. From there, I give them just a quick rundown of what it is I'm doing, what it would entail, ask for an email address, ask for what interests you within the business community, what topics, sectors, industries interest you, to select that, to submit it. Then they get an automatic email with a link to a 10-part questionnaire for drill down. Where do you come, what industry you work in, how do you consume your news? Do you like more tactile, paper? Do you like digitally? What devices and whatnot? I've been going about that way to gauge, what my audience wants, or what is there a need, and how could I fulfill that need?
Yeah. So obviously there's another layer of data you can put on there. That's census data, that's market data, things that you can get from other places. But that is a really great way to get qualitative data about exactly that, the need. And some layers that you can add on to that are, the AdWords that you're using Google AdWords or Facebook ads, whatever you're using. The language that you're using there, you can start doing, an audience development plan with that and start A/B testing those and logging what kind of language is working. You know, how can you increase the number of people getting to your landing page? But honestly, that approach sounds fantastic. It's more than I think a lot of early publishers do. The one thing I would say is, like, are you also collecting? You should also ask, can I meet you with you? You know,
Right.
would you be open to an in-person meeting? Because you'll get so much more to create that persona by seeing the way they, like, you know, do they use coffee cups like this? You know, like things like that. They tell you a little better.
Right.
So that's a really great transition as well. I'm here pretty much the entire conference. I leave a little early Saturday. Feel free to grab me anytime. I do have a decent understanding of Google Analytics. It takes a lifetime to learn Google Analytics. And if you want to go through some of that, I can show you, you know, if you need help diagnosing a problem. I'd be happy to sit down with you. If you have worked on your persona and your plan, even better, we can go through that and we can talk about opportunities or potential success metrics or, you know, the viability of an audience, whatever. I'm around. I'm happy to talk. My email address is up there. I had hoped to actually get everyone's email address, but there's way too many people here, so that I can follow up and maybe send you guys some tips on Google Analytics or on creating user personas or whatever. So feel free to email me and say, hey, I would love your tips. That's it. Thank you guys all for coming. Great. Way more than 4